All right, we are on. Thank God, we're on day six of Sichos HaRan, and today we're going to start Sicha Hey. Sicha Hey is a little bit long, so it's going to take us a few days to get through. It's also, I think, there's a lot to develop here, and there's a lot to talk about here. And for me personally, it's a challenging one because it's one of the many places where Rabbi Nachman spends time um, derogating and downplaying and insulting the value of the Svarim Chitzonium and philosophy and science and I guess what one might say, quote unquote, is secular wisdom. Exactly what these things mean is complicated, or what these Svarim Chitzonium or Sifrei Hamerchakim exactly Hamachakrim exactly refers to, but it's a little bit complicated. But to someone like myself, that's it's a challenging piece that needs to be explored. So it's gonna take a few days to get through Sifrei, I think. But as we always do, before we begin, and I actually spoke to a friend of mine who I originally picked this up from about this today, and we sort of tried to reinforce each other's commitment to kind of doing this. But we'll start off with a breath, a slow breath, a transition, a moment of transition between whatever it is that we are doing, working, driving in a car, running around, whatever it is that we happen to be doing, to transition into trying to get whatever we can to be in a mind space and a head space and a heart space to get whatever we can from this brief limud. So Sicha Hey opens as follows. It says, "Hayamigana ma'od al sifrei hamechakrim ba'philosophy." Rabbi Nachman was derogated and insulted greatly. The Sfarim of the Mechakrim, of the investigators. I don't think this doesn't refer to science necessarily. I think it refers to sort of speculative theology. He also says philosophy. Va'amar, he said, she'ein sham klal seichel gamor. There is no absolute seichel. There's no whole seichel within these books. Kamo sheyesh be'ez maimar marsha or maramsheh. The way that there is in a random comment of the Marsha, or a random comment of the Maramshif, excuse me. There is not the kind of seichel gamor found in these books that you would find in any little random piece of Torah. He's going to go on later in this piece, and he is going to hedge. I think we mentioned this yesterday, but he is going to hedge. And he's going to say, yes, of course, there's very smart things in these books, and there is wisdom in these books, and so on. So I think it's important to contextualize and understand what he's getting at. There's something missing in these books, in the philosophy, in the psychology, in the maybe in the science as well, and in the history and the sociology and the anthropology and the self-help and all the other good kinds of stuff. There's plenty there. But nevertheless, there's something missing there that you can't get, but you can find in any random comment from in any piece of Torah that you would ever find, right? And I think specifically here, he's talking. He says Maimar Marsha, Maram Shif. He's selecting sort of a random comment on Talmud, meaning not even talking about Pnimius HaTorah and sort of the deep inner wisdom of Torah, but even sort of the regular meat and potatoes of Torah. That contains a seichel gamor, a complete and whole seichel intellect that we don't find in these other kinds of books. And likewise in all the other books of our holy books. Sheyesh behem amkus v'seichel nifla v'na'im ma'od. On our books, even sort of, again, the random comments, not sort of the deep developed philosophy and spirituality and so on that we find in our books, but even the things that are not the deeply developed spirituality parts of our books, the guf of Torah, so to speak. Even there, sheyesh behem amkus v'seichel nifla, they contain depth and they contain wondrous intellect. v'na'im ma'od, and they're very, very pleasant. Avo be'elu asvarim, but in these books of the Machakrim and the philosophy, and the books of Sifarim Chitzonim, outside books, books that are not within our Torah tradition, that are not elaborating, expounding, drawing on Torah, but are other kinds of wisdom. Lo nimtza ze haseichel klal. You will not find that kind of wisdom. He doesn't say lo nimtza seichel klal. You won't find any wisdom. And he again later on in this very same shicha, he does emphasize that there is wisdom in these books, and there's many great and important and valuable things in these books, but you won't find this kind of wisdom. So we have to think about and explore a little bit what it is that he's referring to. What is the value? What is the qualitative difference between what we get in a sort of, let's say, the smallest piece of Torah, the most unsophisticated perhaps piece of Torah, versus the most sophisticated books outside of Torah. Ki hein medavrim rak b'derech hakeshem minei ubei ad shebaim le'ezim opet. Because these books, these outside books, these books of philosophy and psychology and history and anthropology and sociology and self-help and even spirituality that is not spirituality expounding on and drawing down Torah. How do these work? These books work. They proceed by way of deductive reasoning and comparison and analogy, and they're just propagating, really, if we think about what he's saying here, that b'derech hakeshem minei ubei, sort of internal deductive logic, meaning they're just elaborating and expounding from within themselves until they come up with some new idea, right? To the extent that you have real books that are really saying new things, but really they're operating within this system that they've already, the parameters of the system of wisdom that they've already set for themselves, and they're elaborating and expounding and developing it. But the seichel, the intellect, the wisdom that is in our Torah, lahavdil, to differentiate it from that wisdom, ein sham klal bal. That doesn't have this. That doesn't have this sort of, I guess another way of translating it is to sort of say this self-referential reasoning, or this self-referential investigation. That's not that's not found in our Torah. That's only found in these books that are outside of Torah. And so the wisdom that we find in those books is not in Torah. The wisdom we find in Torah can't be found in those books. And so I want to just maybe take a moment to just explore this idea a little bit more. He's going to expand on this idea a little bit and develop this a little bit more extensively further on in the piece. And again, as we started off, it's going to take us a good number of days to get through this piece, but to get through all of Sicha. But I think one way of parsing the difference, and I think this is consistent with what he's saying over here and what he says later in the piece, but one way of parsing the difference perhaps between Torah and Sifrei HaMachakrim, between Torah and the other wisdoms that are outside of Torah, is that ultimately the role and the focus of Torah is fundamentally different than the role and focus of every other kind of wisdom and learning that we find within the world. Torah is referred to as Eidos. Eidos Hashem Ne'amana. It's a testimony. Hirsch develops this in many different places, and it's worthwhile to see those things, although I don't have them in front of me. But Hirsch develops this idea in numerous places that the Torah is fundamentally a form of witness. Torah is a form of witnessing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a form of witnessing God. Or to put it in Panemius language, Torah is the ultimate Gilui Elokos. Torah is the ultimate revelation and tool, means through which the reality of the divine, whatever exactly that means, is somehow revealed to us through Torah. In another sense, Torah is the thing that takes us from ayin to yesh, from the nothingness that exists before creation and before existence, into the reality that exists within creation and within existence. This is an idea that I think we've been sort of playing around with a little bit in the Tuesday night shir on Sif Seichein, The idea that we find in the Rosh Hashanah, we find in the Ramchal, and we find in other places that Torah itself is the Kav Ein Sof. Torah itself is the thread of Or Ein Sof, it's the thread of infinite light, the thread of the infinite Ratzon Hashem that is somehow contained within and creates through it all of the reality that exists within that symptom, all of the reality of the created world is a function of Torah. Or to put it slightly differently, in terms of the Kabbalah's HaRizal, the Arizal describes how every two stages within reality, from a lower level to a higher level, to a more material thing to a more ephemeral and more spiritual thing, everything has a bridge between them. There's always a bridge between lower levels and higher levels, between different forms of reality. And the ultimate bridge is the Kav or Ein Sof. The ultimate bridge is the thread of light, of the Or Ein Sof that descends from the Ein Sof itself, from the infinite reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that existed before creation, and descends into creation, into the space within which creation exists, to create creation. That's the ultimate bridge, because on the one hand, it's a thread of this infinite expression of the light and reality and presence and will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because if it wasn't a full expression of that infinite presence, then it wouldn't be capable of creating the full expression and the full revelation of God's reality within this world. It has to be a full expression of the Ein Sof, and it's called the Kav or Ein Sof. It's a thread of the infinite light. But on the other hand, it's a thread. It's measured, it's bounded, it's limited, and it exists within reality rather than on the outside of reality. And so it partakes of a paradox. The Kav or Ein Sof partakes of a paradox. It is both infinite and finite all at the same time. And Torah is that thing. We find in many Sfarim that Torah is that thing that is infinite and finite all at the same time. It's, as the Gemara says, it's Ana Nashi Kasavis Yahavis. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying, I am enclothing my soul, I'm handing you my soul written down in words. I'm putting my soul into writing, which is, again, sort of this incomprehensible paradox of taking infinity, the essence of Torah, and containing it and enclothing it within the finitude of a written text. And we encounter this when we encounter Torah in general, where Torah is this infinitely, endlessly unfolding thing. It comes from infinity and it continues to unfold into infinity. It's never fully understood and it's always constantly being revealed, but every part of it that's revealed is somehow demonstrably contained within the original. It just was patent and potential within that original Torah and not brought out into reality. And so, in a certain sense, the uniqueness of Torah is that Torah creates this bridge between ayin and yesh, between infinity and infinitude, between the Borei, the creator, and the Nivra, creation. And it sort of straddles the line between those two things, and it partakes of both of them, and it exhibits characteristics of both of them, and exists within both spaces at the same time. And maybe that's what the uniqueness of Torah really is all about. And no matter what kind of brilliant wisdom and insight and understanding is found anywhere else, all of that other insight and wisdom and understanding is always contextualized within creation. It never partakes in any way, shape, or form of what's outside of creation. It does not bridge the gap between what's here and what's out there. It doesn't bridge the gap between finitude and infinity. This is maybe what Rabbi Nachman is getting at when he says that all of these other forms of wisdom, they're medabrim rak but derech hakeshim mimei. They sort of are self-referential. They engage in deductive reasoning that's self-referential. They're stuck, not in a bad way. Again, I have enough graduate degrees, and I spend my professional life teaching this stuff. So I don't think that this is necessarily disparaging, but it's just a marking out of what the limits of any other form of wisdom and any other form of learning are. And that limit is that all other forms of wisdom outside of Torah are contextualized and limited within the Bria. They only trying to self-referentially, so to speak, look at what's already here, look at what can be observed, through observing it, under trying to understand it better, trying to make connections between things and understand even the yichud of everything and the connections between everything in deeper and more profound ways. As Rabbi Nachman here says, that they use this self-referential deductive reasoning to arrive at Eza Mofet, to arrive at wondrous sort of insights. I think, we're not disparaging this stuff, but we are contextualizing and appreciating it, that there's a fundamental difference between what we are encountering when we encounter Torah, which is a paradoxical bridge between creation and the creator, between our limited reality that we see around us and the infinite reality that lies beyond it. And when we engage and look at all the other types of things that are out there, all we are encountering in a very important way and in a very valuable way, but what we're encountering is a digging down into where we already are, digging deep into where we already are, and trying to understand where we already are. But no matter how far it seems to be reaching, it's always stuck within creation and with the boundaries of creation, and never can really bridge the gap to the wisdom and to the reality that exists outside of the context within which that wisdom can be developed and articulated. And so maybe that's the core difference here between Torah and Sifrei HaMechates. And God willing, we'll develop this a little bit more and try to apply it a little bit more practically further on, as he continues to take this idea and use it to kind of create a dichotomy, I guess, between different forms of avodas Hashem, sophisticated and simple and wholesome. So Bezras Hashem will continue that. Until then, have a wonderful, fantastic day.